Okay, we're into an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool review for you guys from Zorbello. A little about them. The Zor encapsulates the strength and resilience of their products from their Slavic roots, and it's paired with bello, an Italian reference to beauty and style. This brand's goal is pretty simple. It's to create a line of uniquely stylish and affordable watches for every man. And within that kind of everyman, everyday type of theme, they've created this watch, which is a bit of an everyday watch, a bit of a traveler's watch. So you're going to see those mixture of both sporty and dressy attributes. And you're also going to see a GMT functionality. So you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is their G1, and it's Zorbello's take on a sporty everyday GMT watch. These go for $510 direct, and big shout out to Zorbello for sending this piece in and reaching out. Of course, I'm always up to review new brands who are bringing something new to the table, whether that be design, whether that be their themes, or even sometimes a lot of it has to do just with plain old bang per buck and value per dollar. And I think this hits on a lot of those different fronts. And yeah, I'm really excited to share it with you guys because it's a little bit different than what you've kind of been seeing, especially within the Microbrand space. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. So where I think this is going to be really, I think a good introduction would be within the more casual watch space, right? I think, of course, a lot of collectors, they get into very niche categories, and I'd say things are trending downsize. But that doesn't mean there's a lot of people, that there aren't a lot of people out there that do enjoy a larger watch, especially for a sportier everyday piece. And this really fits to that because this has a 42 millimeter diameter, is 13 millimeters thick, and has a 47 millimeter lug to lug, made out of full 316L stainless steel, brushed and polished. It does have a flat sapphire there, which does have an inner air coating. It has a fixed 24-hour sloped chapter ring. As you guys can see, it has a push-pull crown that is nicely signed there, and it does pack the Seiko automatic or Seiko Instruments automatic collar style GMT with a 41-hour power reserve and a 3 hertz beat rate. And yeah, this thing is pretty nice. Of course, the NH34, as you guys can see, nicely branded there. And yeah, this is just a little bit different. It's a bit of a throwback to a simpler time in Microbrands. And I think that's kind of fun, honestly. Like this watch 5-10 years ago, especially considering that it has a mechanical GMT movement, which makes it already kind of insane, but now is kind of the norm thanks to Seiko, thanks to the likes of Miyota as well for putting out some mechanical GMT movements. You might kind of miss this one, out there just because it's just something a little different. I would say that, yeah, this is pretty cool and pretty different. And you guys can see there's a lot of different styling cues that are happening here, and none of it is really in an homage territory. So I can appreciate that. They do have some models where, certain aspects of different dials and architectures. But for overall, I would say that this is more on the original side. And there's a lot of newer brands that don't really start out on the original side. A lot of them kind of stick close to what's safe, which is going to be very much kind of mainstream homage type of territory. Now, here, again, less of the homage territory, but, probably a little bit more polarizing in terms of its style, because this isn't going to be for everybody, but it does have a pretty cool colorway. There's a couple of different options, but I thought this one would be kind of the one that would be, I'd say versatile enough to share with all of you. Now, in terms of some of the details of the dial, you guys can see it has that nice sunray blue dial with that gradient fume type of feature there, which does start off bright and then it kind of gets darker on the outer reaches, which is great because it blends right in to that 24-hour index there on that slope chapter ring. And then you do have a date there at 3 o'clock, which does, although doesn't have a framed window, it does have kind of an outline type of painted frame, which is nice as well. You're also going to get some polished skeletonized hands there for legibility purposes, and it does have some nice lume, which isn't specified, but we'll definitely pay close attention when we get to that portion. It does have 10 atmospheres or 100 meters of water resistance, so that definitely keeps it comfortably within that kind of everyday wearable space. It has a 22 millimeter lug width, which I think proportionally for a 42 millimeter watch makes sense. 42 and 22, and then 40 millimeters and 20. Honestly, I like a 20 millimeter lug width on kind of everything. When it goes below that, it gets in the 19s, 18s. I think 18 is a little small. I think 19 is a little niche. It's harder to find stuff that fits, but if you have it on a good bracelet, it doesn't really matter. Here, luckily for you guys, it's 22, which is very even and very easy to find other strap options for. And with these really cool colorways and little design features, right? Like you guys can see here. I mean, look at that little bevel there, nice and crisp. And then you got that, you got some kind of gear toothing there that's kind of at every 12 hours, which is another nice reference to the time, to also, to, of course, your, time telling, which is great. So, I mean, the nice thing is you can reference it. If, let's say, it's completely pitch black or anything, you can feel that. You can feel the notch. You're going to have some lume there. But, for whatever reason, let's say, it's just nice to have kind of a quick reference. It also lets you know if things are aligning. So that's nice too. So, getting into this bracelet, it's solid links, H-link style, as you guys can see, solid end links, and then it does have a push button deployant style, butterfly style clasp, which I know isn't everybody's favorite, but it does the job. And also, in terms of the construction, this is going to have split pin construction, so that's where you save a little bit of the money there on cost, but I would say it still feels relatively robust in terms of how thick and, I would say hefty it does feel. And I know a lot of people enjoy hefty watches, and it's just not the cool thing, not the loudest thing, or the most in style thing right now. I know there's a lot of bigger wristed folks, and even people with smaller wrists that just like to have a little bit more wrist presence, that have been a little bit disappointed with the direction of a lot of the trends trending downwards. So again, it's nice to mix things up and check out something like this. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this wears really well. Of course I do have a larger wrist at 7.5 inches, but you guys can also see that it's also quite round. So it's not like I have a super flat, wide, accommodating wrist. I definitely have to be mindful of, the proportions, the ultimate lug to lug and everything like that as well. But I will say this does wrap around the wrist really well, as you guys can see there. Also, of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion, and it's going to appear a lot larger all of a sudden than it actually is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low here, and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio. Check that out, guys. Very nice. And when you look at that, that looks quite thin, especially for a GMT watch. Check that out, if I can get it to focus here. Yes. Look at that. Nice little details. Again, it's not the sharpest in terms of those transitions. It's not some luxury watch or anything like that, but it's a great little everyday piece. And honestly, this is the type of watch most non-collectors really gravitate towards, right? Something that has a signature appeal to it, right? It looks different. It has some cool color play. It has a versatile design. It has some polished sections, which make it, a little bit dressy, but it also has a lot of satin finishes, which keep it very tool-like, especially with this bracelet. I mean, this is the kind of watch my dad would really enjoy. He does like certain watches that are a bit more classical, but typically they're more in precious metals. But in terms of his daily wears, he definitely likes, he enjoys a bigger mechanical watch, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's something that, just because it's not the perfect watch for you doesn't mean it's not the perfect watch for someone else. And honestly, perfection is overrated. I find the stuff that you go most crazy about is probably are going to be the ones where there is something to love, but also some things to hate, where the brands really like to, commit to their design versus creating something that is just ultimately unoffensive. Because being unoffensive and not having something that you don't like doesn't necessarily mean that you will like it. The lack of features that you hate doesn't automatically mean that it's good. And that's something to just keep in mind, especially, when you're out there watch shopping, especially for others, let's say like a gift type of space. So with that said, let's actually get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, check that out. They even loomed the chapter ring. That's awesome. It's not super potent in terms of the actual, that chapter ring and how bright it's going to be. If we leave it on here for a bit, it'll probably start fading, from that initial brightness, but it's hanging in there. So let me actually hit it maybe with a little black light just so you guys can get a little highlight of it again. But of course, one thing I always like to work in is a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. Wow, guys. Let's go back, rewind that. Look at this dial play. Holy cow. That is fantastic. I'm very impressed with that. That looks fantastic. That Fume dial. It has some absolute play there. That is cool. Wow. I wasn't expecting it to be that dynamic, and shifty in this light. But yeah, you're not always going to be out in great lighting like the studio lights might be able to recreate. So yeah, it's nice to see how legible this is, right? And ultimately how this does render. And look at that. I mean, for those of you that aren't super into like, hey, this has to have the finest hairline brushing or the Zaratsu distortionless polishing, like, there's a lot of people that just don't go that far. They don't go that deep into watches, or, and it's like, hey, if it does the job, it does the job at a functional level. And this definitely has that, and it's not too expensive. I mean, $500 isn't cheap, but I will say there's a lot worse watches that you can find for $500 that are just mainstream, but you're just buying the name. I'd say here, instead of buying the name, you're spending money on other little details, right? And yeah, I can appreciate that. And this brand, although not particularly like, hey, this is right in my lane, my cup of tea type of thing, there's definitely a lot of potential here. I'm digging this. That is just cool. So guys, with all that, closing thoughts on the wrist, it has a nice modern feel. It has full size. This isn't mid-size. This isn't classically sized. This is just a full-sized sports watch. And it doesn't approach oversized. Of course, at least not on my wrist. And again, sizing is very much subjective. But for those of you who are like, into smaller watches, I lost you a long time ago. Those of you who like bigger watches, hopefully you're still hanging out, because I think this is a cool one. That's definitely worth a look, especially at the price point. So in terms of model variants, definitely check the site links in the description for more options and availability. In terms of comparable models, quality wise, I'd compare this to the brands like Spinnaker. So if you're used to buying, those types of watches within that price point, Spinnaker, kind of that, more mainstream finishing, nothing, there's not going to be errors, like no sharp edges or anything unfinished. It feels very well done and well executed, not anything that's trying too hard or trying to approach any type of luxury level like that. Some brands really focus on that. This here is definitely more of just functional fit and finish. You're not going to have any problems, again, from that functional perspective. But yeah, they're not going, to the 11th or 10th or 12th, level of satinization and polishing. And, there's going to be really not a lot of special trickery done in terms of any ornate details. And then in terms of the bottom line, guys, I was pleasantly surprised by this brand, and this model in particular. I think it's always nice to see more original designs from brands that are willing to take some risks, and really offer something fresh to the market. And I think that's pretty cool, guys. Maybe you've seen a watch that looks like this and you can point me to it down in the comments below. But yeah, for me, I looked at this, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's something a little bit more of an original take, even down to having a fixed 24-hour bezel, instead of having it on the outside, it's there on the inside. Yeah, they're just doing something, and I like that it feels purposeful. It feels like they did this because they liked the vibe on it, and it wasn't just like, we'll do this thing to be somewhat different than this other watch, but we're going to do these other things that are going to make it look like this other watch. So yeah. Just something a little refreshing, nice little palate cleanser for the channel today. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please leave a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.